Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? If you've been involved or been the caregiver for a close relative or loved one while they're undergoing a terminal illness, whether you're at the end of that journey or somewhere in the middle or just at the beginning of it, it's hard. And I wanted to make this video, I wanted to make it for a while, just to share my experience in the hope that it might help somebody with their own journey through this. So I'll talk about my own experience because it's been 5 years now. So anyhow, back in 2020, actually 2019, my partner Megan, who I'd been with for at that time in about 5 years, there was this really bad cough going around. I don't know if you remember this, especially in New England around November of 2019. It was like a virus, but you cough your brains out and your lungs hurt. And hers didn't stop. So right after Christmas, she went to the local walk-in and they did an x-ray and they discovered some kind of mass on her right lung and sent her to the hospital right away. Say, go get a CAT scan. So I get this text from her, I'm going to the hospital. And she comes back and they found something, they're not sure what it is, could be cancer. So, she already said, well, it looks like it's not good. So we ended up, she had to have some kind of biopsies done. And by the 7th of January in 2020, it was diagnosed and confirmed that she did in fact have adenocarcinoma of the lung. They weren't sure what stage. And so that set the stage for our journey at that point. And, we didn't realize how long or how short that journey was going to be, but, it was getting scary. And so very quickly, she went in, was supposed to have part of her lung removed. They discovered that, in fact, it had, hit her lymph nodes, so they stopped because that's not, the resection of the tumor at that point is not the recommended course of action. First you do chemotherapy. And after a couple of days, they found out, in fact, it had jumped to the other side. So now it was stage 3B cancer, which is a whole different thing. And so we prepared for the fight. And at this point, I did a lot of research. Now, I'm very lucky in that I'm really good friends with one of the top oncologists. He won't tell you that, but his friends will. A great, very, very renowned oncologist. So my friend Jose was able to give me a lot of information. So I was able to study a lot of stuff on my own, but he gave me an awful lot of information, made sure that I understood the things. People are not statistics. And just because the statistics say that you have about a year, doesn't mean that she's going to have a year, all that kind of stuff. But he helped prepare me and help educate me for what was going on. And every time we had a question, I could ask him what was going on. The bottom line was that I found out that the prognosis was very bad, that the life expectancy was probably going to be a year. And it might be 5 years, and that was a really, really small chance. Like a lot of things would have to go in her favor. They didn't. I made the conscious choice at that point not to discuss this with her at that level. She needed to, stay positive and fight and all that kind of stuff. So I kept that to myself. So that was my burden, if you will. And I didn't even share that with her sister, who was very close and involved in the whole thing. It was something I felt like I should hold on to this. It wasn't something that they needed to worry about, especially Megan. And essentially, I just went back and read the transcript because I kept people up to date on Facebook, and I eventually, took all those posts and made it into just a transcript of what happened. And it was difficult to read because everything that could go wrong did go wrong. She wasn't able to continue on the treatments for any real length of time. It was stop and start. It was during COVID-19. So she had to go to the hospital a lot because of elevated temperatures, which they weren't sure if it was cancer or something else. She had, various reactions to the steroids, various reactions to the chemotherapy, to the radiation. She ended up having what was misdiagnosed for a while, actually like a swelling in her esophagus because of the radiation, which closed it off. And, she had to get a G-tube, all these kind of things. But she had to go in the hospital a lot, and I could not go with her because of COVID-19. I could come in and visit after a while, and we got to know the people on the oncology floor. But very often I had to drop her off at the front door, and I wasn't allowed to go in, especially if she, they weren't sure if she had COVID-19 or whatever was going on. And as things progressed, it continued to be a pleural effusions and pleural embolisms, and, it wasn't good. And I'd forgotten how precipitous the drop was in her quality of life and how often she spent in the hospital. And I wasn't able to talk to her. And then getting her back and just how uncomfortable she was, how bad her quality of life got really, really fast. to the point where I'm helping to bathe her and feed her, and she's got the G tube, and she couldn't really do very much on her own, and she was, getting very short of breath and very unsteady. And at some point, the cancer actually spread to her brain, so her mental capacity started to, deteriorate, and started to deteriorate pretty precipitously after a while. And she had she was falling, and I had to like constantly be around her. I was very, very fortunate that we had some fundraisers, and people were generous enough that when my job actually moved, and I decided to take a severance, I was able to spend the last 6 months of her life taking care of her, and I could stay home. And we were worried for a while, but it turned out that we had just enough money that we didn't have to worry about her not having a salary or me not having a salary. So that was incredible. And I can't express my thanks enough to this day that we had that. And I was even able to stay home for a few months after she passed in December, because that's what happened. But December 17th, she passed away right in front of me. Literally watched her take her, struggle for breath and take her last breaths. And by that time, we had taken her off oxygen. I'd had to make the decision to put her on hospice care, and it was difficult, especially the conversations that we had with professionals. I'll never forget this conversation where I went to the gym because she was in the hospital. I couldn't go in, and they're saying, I think it's time for hospice care. So it's a Zoom call with her and the counselor and me, and there's nothing I can do. I'm just in the parking lot after working out, and Megan say, I don't think I'm ready for this. I'm not ready for this yet. Who is? And by that point, her cognitive functioning was poor, but she understood, that things were dire. And I remember during the last month or so of her life, before she became completely, incapacitated and couldn't speak, she started to become very sad, and wondering how much time she had left. And she didn't really hear from her oncologist until much later, when they're saying, well, we're looking at months here. And she was convinced it was years. So maybe it wasn't the right idea not to tell her. I don't know. This doesn't come with a playbook. But as a caregiver, fortunately, I had resources to take care of myself, despite COVID-19 preventing like anybody from coming to the house. We had a couple people come in. There was some palliative care that came in, but initially we thought we're going to have all these friends to come over and help us. They couldn't, and they could drop food off, and that was about it. And they couldn't do anything else. So it was difficult, but we still had a lot of help. I had a lot of support in the recovery community. When that happened, meetings went online, and I was able to go on Zoom. So I was able to do that every night, actually, which really, really helped in terms of a support system. Looking back on it, though, there were times when, she started to go to sleep, but wasn't quite asleep, and I went out to go to the online meeting. And there's times I think to myself, I wish I'd spent more time with her. And it was hard because I was taking care of myself. And looking back on it, I should have spent even some more time with her. Just sitting there and holding her hand. It was difficult. Part of, what I learned and what I experienced was, many people go through premature grieving. I knew that it wasn't going to end well. I didn't know when, but I knew it was going to end sooner rather than later. And, I'd already started to grieve her and started to come to terms with her eventual passing. And, even started to get in the mindset of well, I need to move on. Which is, I don't feel guilty for it, but it's one of those things you can look at and feel guilty, like, my gosh, I'm abandoning this person already. I didn't abandon her. I was there for everything. But, I guess it's a psychological defense mechanism at that point, And fortunately, I've always been a person that's been able to go into caregiver mode and distance myself emotionally from family members when there's things going on. I remember holding my kids down when they were getting their shots, and the doctor being really, impressed. It's like, well, I do this for a living. I was in direct care for a living at the time. And yeah, I don't want my child to hurt, but I know it's necessary. And so I was able to do a little bit of that with Megan. And I was able to go a little bit of caregiver mode. And, the grief kind of came in flashes. When you're right in the thick of the thing and you have something to do, it's very easy to kind of go on autopilot. And as a lot of caregivers know, and not realize how much of a toll it's taking on you until later. And so I had some of that happen to me, and unfortunately I had supports, but it was difficult. We did have some good friends come over near the end when it was imminent, and the threat of COVID-19 was a little bit less, and at that point it didn't matter. to be quite honest. And so they were a lot less, once you get into serious hospice care, they're a lot less concerned about, the person catching an infection, But it was quite an experience and a moving experience. And, I'm glad I made the conscious decision to move on. And because I know people that have lost loved ones, their partner. I lost my partner. And, I thought this was going to be it. And stay stuck for years, for decades, and how devastating and unhealthy that is. And so I made this conscious decision I wasn't going to do that. I'm glad, the relationship I had with Megan was spectacular. It was the best relationship I ever had until my relationship with Susan, which, lightning struck twice, and I'm a very, very lucky man. And that's an even better relationship, believe it or not. And she's a phenomenal partner. And it was difficult. It was very, very difficult talking to her. It's one of those things where you start to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes for a second. And if you're a partner of a person that's widowed, has lost somebody, it's hard not to feel like a consolation prize. And I remember Susan expressing that, on several times when, I had to let her know and that no, that's not the case. And yeah, I hold Megan with me, and it's a different relationship now. You can be in love with two people at the same time in a weird sort of way. I love the memory of Megan, and she touched me, and she was, I'll always treasure the time we had together. But, that was then, and this is now. It sounds cold, but it's not really cold, if you know what I mean. And I think it's one of those things that unless you're a member of the club and you've experienced this and gone on, you don't quite understand. It's hard for people around you or your new partner to understand. And fortunately, on a practical level, I don't want this video to be too long. As soon as we knew things were dire, as soon as she got the diagnosis, I had some friends that were in the legal profession, and we took care of all the stuff. I got power of attorney right away. I got put on the mortgage and on the homeowner stuff and all that kind of stuff right away, or not the mortgage, but the as a co-owner of the home. Everything to make the transfer easier that we knew was coming at some point. We just didn't know when. And so it was a difficult time. If you're going through this now, take care of yourself. Understand that it's going to be difficult. There were times like with the medical system, going back and reading this transcript or document, I started to get mad again because there were times when I really felt like the medical system was failing us and they weren't communicating with each other and they weren't communicating with me as having the power of attorney and making decisions and, and there's this feeling, overall feeling during any thing like this of hopelessness. Well, you can be, but helplessness. You're completely out of control. I was out of control of Megan's disease. I was out of control of her reaction to the treatment. And I'm out of control of the medical system. I can only do so much. And yes, looking back on it now, it's not, not just displaced anger. There were some things that they did wrong. If they acted differently, would it have extended Megan's life or made her life easier? I don't know. But, it's okay to be a little angry, but, that doesn't, just being angry isn't going to be productive. But advocating for yourself, advocating for the other person is very, very important. And taking care of yourself is important. Taking care of the other person is important. Being there for them during, what's going to be a very difficult time for them, but the most difficult time of their life, for sure. That's been my experience with it. It's not, it's something you get through. It's something that you can get to the other side. It doesn't have to define you as a human being and ruin your life forever. But it's an experience that you will remember that will change you. And in my case, I think it's changed me for the better. It's made me appreciate life a little bit more. It's made me appreciate the connections we have a little bit more and the generosity of others when I can be, relatively jaded and cynical. That, people will still step up and help you during difficult times, But it's not something you can control. It's something to be, and it's not, there's something that it's hard to know exactly what to do right. Should I tell Megan just how bad the prognosis is or not, or just keep her positive and fight? And I chose to do that and just share it with a couple of people. These are difficult things. Those are difficult burdens to hold by yourself and to, be in the room and not say. But I think from a loving perspective, it's probably the best thing to do. Anyhow, I'm starting to ramble now, but hopefully this helps. Hopefully, somebody out there watches this and you can relate. And just know that, lots of people go through this. It's okay to have all kinds of different emotions, and there's no playbook that comes with it. You know, so if you're going through this and you're doing a good job, because it's a lot bigger than you are, a lot bigger. All right, have a good one, kids. Next video will be happy.